You want to be disciplined? You want to be consistent. You want to wake up early, eat clean, focus, work hard, stay committed, and stop procrastinating. You want to stop breaking promises to yourself. You want to live with control instead of chaos. But every time you try to build discipline, something inside you fights back. You find yourself negotiating with your goals, delaying your tasks, sabotaging your own progress, craving comfort instead of growth. You promise yourself tomorrow will be different, but tomorrow arrives and the pattern repeats. And then you look at yourself and wonder, why can't I just do what I know I need to do? This frustration doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're human. It means your brain is operating exactly as it was designed to. Your mind resists discipline, because discipline goes against its oldest programming. Your brain was not built for modern success. It was built for survival. Thousands of years ago, conserving energy kept you alive. Seeking comfort ensured safety. Avoiding difficulty protected you. Your mind was designed to save you from danger, not push you toward growth. But today, danger isn't the threat. Comfort is. Your brain still believes conserving energy is a good thing. It still believes avoiding discomfort is intelligent. It still believes doing the easy thing is the right thing because in ancient environments, it was. But in modern life, the easy thing is the destructive thing. The comfort-seeking brain is now the obstacle between you and the life you want. This is why discipline feels like a fight, because it literally is. It is a psychological war between the outdated survival brain and the conscious, intentional mind trying to grow. When you attempt discipline, you are battling millions of years of wiring. That's why the moment you try to improve your life, your mind creates resistance. It whispers excuses. It amplifies doubt. It magnifies discomfort. It pushes you toward instant gratification. It makes you crave what is familiar, not what is beneficial. Your mind prefers repetition over progress, safety over change, comfort over transformation. Not because you're weak, but because your brain thinks comfort equals survival. Your mind resists discipline because discipline requires effort, and effort feels threatening. The human brain is built to recognize effort as a potential danger signal. Hard things require energy. Energy is precious. Your survival-based mind fears running out of it. That's why tasks feel heavier in your head than they do once you start them. The mental resistance is often worse than the task itself. You spend more energy avoiding work than doing the work. You exhaust yourself with overthinking, spiraling, delaying, regretting instead of acting. The brain does not compute discipline as growth. It computes it as risk. This is the conflict that keeps you stuck. Your mind resists discipline because comfort has become a drug. Modern life provides endless shortcuts, distractions, pleasures, and conveniences. You can numb boredom instantly. You can avoid loneliness instantly. You can escape effort instantly. You can stimulate your brain instantly. And every time you choose an easy escape, your brain gets rewarded with dopamine, the neurotransmitter that tells your mind, do this again. Over time, the brain becomes addicted to convenience. It becomes addicted to high reward, low effort behaviors. It becomes conditioned to avoid anything that doesn't give fast pleasure. Discipline does not give fast pleasure. It gives slow rewards. That is why your mind rejects it. It wants sugar, not nourishment. Comfort, not character. Stimulation, not progress. Your mind resists discipline because discipline requires identity change. You cannot act consistently like someone you do not believe you are. If your self-image is weak, your discipline will be weak. If you see yourself as inconsistent, you will act inconsistently. If you see yourself as someone who always quits, you will quit again. Your behavior is limited by your internal narrative. You cannot outperform the belief you have about yourself. This year, this month, this week, every time you tried to change, you were trying to build habits on top of an identity that still belonged to your past. And the mind protects identity more than it protects anything else. To change your actions, you must change your identity first. Your mind resists discipline because discipline requires emotional regulation. Discipline is not a behavior problem, it is an emotional one. People don't struggle with tasks. They struggle with the feelings attached to tasks. You avoid the gym not because exercise is hard, but because you don't want to feel discomfort. You avoid studying not because learning is hard, but because you don't want to feel overwhelmed. You avoid difficult conversations not because communication is impossible, but because you don't want to feel conflict. Everything you avoid is tied to an emotion you don't want to face. This is why discipline feels impossible without emotional maturity. You cannot control your actions if you cannot control your feelings. Your mind resists discipline, because discipline requires delayed gratification. The survival brain wants reward now. It wants comfort now. It wants pleasure now. It wants relief now. But discipline says not now. Discipline says later. Discipline says not yet. This creates psychological friction. Your mind prefers the immediate dopamine hit because it feels rewarding instantly. But real goals, financial stability, physical health, emotional intelligence, personal mastery require delayed gratification. They require doing what feels difficult now to experience the benefits later. Your brain interprets this delay as suffering, and when something feels like suffering, your instincts push you away from it. That's why discipline feels unnatural at first. It contradicts the neurological pattern your mind has been reinforcing for years. Your mind resists discipline because it fears change. Every transformation requires stepping into the unknown. The unknown feels unsafe. Even if your current life is unhealthy, your brain still prefers it because it is predictable. Your mind is more comfortable repeating misery than facing uncertainty. That is why people stay in toxic relationships, unfulfilling jobs, unhealthy habits, familiar pain. They are afraid of the discomfort that comes with change. Your brain equates sameness with safety. But safety is not the same as fulfillment. Discipline threatens the familiarity your mind has grown attached to. That is why you self-sabotage even when you want to succeed. The mind protects the familiar. Even when the familiar is destroying you, your mind resists discipline because discipline requires responsibility. And responsibility is heavy. When you take responsibility for your life, you can no longer blame circumstances. You can no longer hide behind excuses. You can no longer claim helplessness. Responsibility forces you to confront your choices, your habits, your patterns, your mindset. That level of honesty is uncomfortable. That level of accountability is confronting. Most people prefer the illusion of helplessness over the weight of responsibility. Your mind avoids discipline because discipline requires owning your life completely, and that level of ownership demands courage. Your mind resists discipline because it is trying to protect you from discomfort. But discomfort is where your growth lives. Discomfort is where your strength is built. Discomfort is where your next level begins. The mind sees discomfort as danger, but the soul sees it as evolution. Discipline is the bridge between who you are and who you want to become. But crossing that bridge requires pushing beyond the brain's instinct to retreat. You must train your mind to understand that discomfort is safe. Discomfort is necessary. Discomfort is not a threat, is a teacher. Your mind resists discipline because you have conditioned it to expect inconsistency. Every time you broke a promise to yourself, your mind learned that your words mean nothing. Every time you quit early, your mind learned that effort ends when emotions get hard. Every time you avoided something difficult, your mind learned that avoidance is the solution. Every time you told yourself you'd start tomorrow, your mind learned that tomorrow is the real plan even though tomorrow never came. The brain learns through repetition. You have unintentionally trained your mind to expect failure. Discipline feels impossible because your brain has been conditioned to believe it is. Your mind resists discipline because you don't yet have a vision strong enough to overpower your excuses. Discipline is not about forcing yourself to do things. It is about wanting something deeply enough that the discipline becomes worth it. The stronger your vision, the easier your discipline becomes. When you don't know what you're working toward, everything feels pointless. When you don't know why you are changing, the mind has no reason to push through discomfort. Vision is the fuel. Discipline is the engine. Without vision, the engine doesn't move. This year taught you that discipline without meaning collapses quickly. You must build a vision powerful enough to justify the struggle. Your mind resists discipline because Discipline demands power, and you are finally ready to reclaim it. This is the beginning of your transformation. This is the turning point. This is the psychological awakening. This is the moment discipline stops being the enemy and becomes your greatest strength. Every single day you live inside a battlefield, not a battlefield made of weapons or enemies, but a battlefield inside your own mind. Battlefield where two forces fight for control over your life, impulse and intention.
One is ancient, emotional, and instinctive.
The other is logical, purposeful, and future-focused. One wants comfort now, the other wants progress later. One whispers, do what feels good, the other whispers, do what is right. Every choice you make is a reflection of which side is winning inside you. Discipline is not a battle against the world, it is a battle against yourself. And until you understand these two forces, you will forever wonder why you keep losing a war you didn't even realize you're fighting. Impulse is the oldest force in your mind. It is the part of you that reacts before thinking, the part of you that wants pleasure, relief, safety, and comfort immediately. It is your emotional brain, the one wired for survival, not success. Impulse is the part of you that scrolls on your phone when you're stressed, the part that eats junk food when you're bored, the part that procrastinates when work feels overwhelming. It's the part that stays in bed when your alarm rings. It's the part that chooses what feels good now instead of what will feel good later. Impulse is powerful because it is fast, loud, and emotionally charged. It promises immediate relief. It gives you instant gratification. It rewards you instantly. And your brain loves instant reward. Intention, on the other hand, is slower. It is quieter. It does not shout, it waits. Intention is your higher self, the part of you that sees your potential, the part of you that wants to build something meaningful with your life, the part of you that writes goals, the part of you that dreams bigger, the part of you that knows what you're capable of if you stop holding yourself back. Intention is the version of you that wants long-term pleasure instead of instant gratification. But intention has a weakness. It does not give quick dopamine. It requires patience, consistency, and discomfort. It requires you to choose what is difficult now so you can enjoy the reward later. This is the war inside you, the emotional brain versus the logical brain, the instinct to survive versus the desire to grow, the impulse to escape versus the intention to evolve. Discipline is simply the act of choosing intention over impulse. But that choice does not come naturally. It requires awareness. It requires strategy. It requires training. Impulse wins when you are tired, when you are overwhelmed, when you are emotional, when you are stressed, when you are fearful. That is why your discipline breaks down on your worst days, not your best ones. Impulse thrives in chaos. It uses your emotions against you. It knows that when you feel discomfort, your first instinct is to escape. And escape is always the easier option. Intention, however, wins when you slow down enough to remember what you truly want. When you breathe, when you reflect, when you act consciously instead of emotionally. Intention wins when you have clarity and structure, when you know your why. When you have built habits that support you even when your emotions try to sabotage you. Intention thrives in calm, focus, and direction. But it cannot win without your participation. Every time you choose comfort over progress, impulse wins a point. Every time you choose procrastination over action, impulse strengthens. Every time you avoid discomfort, escape responsibility, or chase instant pleasure, impulse becomes the dominant force in your life. You begin to live reactively, not intentionally. Each moment becomes about what feels good now instead of what will help your future. This is how people drift through life without realizing they are slowly self-destructing. But every time you choose the difficult thing, the gym instead of the couch, the project instead of procrastination, the healthy meal instead of the unhealthy one, the conversation instead of silence, you strengthen intention. You strengthen discipline. You strengthen the part of you that is working toward the life you want. Every disciplined act, no matter how small, is training your mind to prioritize the future over the present. Impulse and intention are both fighting for control, but only one of them can lead your life. If you allow impulse to run your mind, your life becomes predictable, unfocused, inconsistent, emotional, distracted, chaotic, reactive, and stagnant. You stay where you are. You repeat the same cycles. You sabotage yourself. You regret the choices you make. You drown in guilt. You feel out of control. You blame the world for problems that were created inside you. This is the life impulse builds. But if you allow intention to take control, everything changes. Your actions begin to align with your goals. Your habits become stronger than your excuses. You think before reacting. Stay grounded in moments that once triggered you. You show up even when you don't feel like it. You build a life instead of avoiding it. You become consistent. You become disciplined. You become powerful. This is the life intention builds. So the real question is not, how do I become disciplined? The real question is, how do I train my mind to choose intention over impulse? The first step is understanding triggers. Impulse does not appear randomly, it is triggered. Stress triggers impulse. Boredom triggers impulse. Loneliness triggers impulse. Anxiety triggers impulse. Fatigue triggers impulse. If you want to win the war inside you, you must learn the moments when you are most likely to self-sabotage. When you can predict your impulse, you can prepare for it. Awareness itself weakens its power. The second step is learning to pause. Impulse is fast, it wants you to act without thinking. Intention is slow. It wants you to think before acting. The moment you add a pause, even a few seconds, you disrupt impulse's power. In that pause, you create space. Space to choose, space to breathe, space to redirect. The pause is small, but it is revolutionary. It shifts control from your instincts to your awareness. The third step is building friction around impulsive behaviors. If something is easy to access, your impulse will win. If something is harder to access, your intention has time to intervene. If you keep junk food in the house, your impulse will eat it. If you leave your phone next to your bed, your impulse will scroll on it. If you keep your distractions within reach, your impulse will sabotage you. Discipline is not about willpower, it is about environment. Make bad habits difficult. Make good habits easy. This flips the advantage from impulse to intention. The fourth step is strengthening your future self connection. People who lack discipline often feel disconnected from the future version of themselves. See the future as a stranger, someone far away. But when you care about your future self, discipline becomes natural. Every action becomes a gift to your future. Every disciplined moment becomes a conversation with your future self saying, "I've got you." This connection can be trained through visualization, journaling, reflection, and planning. The more real your future feels, the more power intention has. The fifth step is regulating emotions. Impulse thrives in emotional chaos. If your emotions control your actions, impulse will win every time. But when you learn emotional regulation, breathing, grounding, reframing, self-awareness, you become less reactive. You stop acting on temporary feelings. You start acting on permanent goals. Emotional mastery transforms discipline from something you struggle with into something you maintain naturally. The sixth step is creating identity alignment. When you see yourself as disciplined, your actions follow. When you see yourself as inconsistent, your actions follow. Identity shapes behavior. Behavior reinforces identity. This loop can build you or destroy you. Identity is not built through thinking, it is built through repeated action. Every time you keep a promise to yourself, you earn identity points. Every time you break one, you lose identity points. Discipline grows as identity grows. You must become the kind of person who believes they are disciplined and then prove it with small, consistent actions. The seventh step is removing moral judgment. People think they fail because they're lazy or weak. But shame weakens intention and strengthens impulse. Shame makes you hide. Shame makes you avoid yourself. Shame destroys self-trust. Discipline requires self-compassion, not softness. It's not excuses, but compassion. The understanding that you are human, you are learning, and you can improve. Without compassion, discipline becomes a punishment. With compassion, discipline becomes a choice. The eighth step is creating structure. A life without structure becomes a playground for impulse. When your day has no plan, your emotions run it. When your time is unorganized, your impulses take over. When your routines are unstable, your discipline collapses. Structured environments create disciplined minds. Structure reduces decision fatigue. Structure reduces emotional reactivity. Structure creates momentum. You don't need a complicated plan. You just need consistency. The ninth step is recognizing that impulse never goes away. You do not cure impulse. You do not eliminate it. You do not destroy it. You manage it. You outgrow it. You weaken it. You learn to see it for what it is, a temporary feeling, not your identity. Even the most disciplined people still feel impulse. They just don't obey it. Discipline is not the absence of impulse. It's the refusal to bow to it. The war between impulse and intention never ends, but you decide which side leads your life. Every choice is a vote. Every action is a declaration. Every moment is an opportunity to shift your trajectory. You've spent years letting impulse lead you. Becoming disciplined is not about forcing yourself to do hard things. It is not about punishing yourself into action. It is not about setting alarms, writing goals, or pushing through willpower until you collapse. True discipline is not behavior, it is identity. It is who you believe you are at the deepest level. Because the truth is simple. You will always act in alignment with the person you think you are. If you see yourself as someone who quits, you will quit again. If you see yourself as someone who is inconsistent, you will be inconsistent. If you see yourself as someone who procrastinates, you will procrastinate. If you see yourself as someone who breaks promises, you will break promises. Your identity is the operating system beneath all your habits. You cannot build the life you want with a self-image rooted in the patterns you're trying to escape. And that is why most people fail at discipline. They try to build new habits on top of an old identity. It's like trying to install new software on a corrupted system. No matter how hard you try, the old programming wins. Identity is the strongest force in the human mind. Once you adopt a belief about who you are, your brain becomes determined to prove it true. If you believe I'm just not a disciplined person, your brain will search for evidence to support it. It will replay your failures. It will ignore your progress. It will highlight your worst habits. It will sabotage your efforts. Because the brain is not designed to make you successful, it is designed to keep your identity consistent. Even if that identity is hurting you. Even if that identity is outdated. Even if that identity is slowly destroying your potential. You don't struggle with discipline because you're weak. You struggle because your identity has not yet caught up to your goals. Identity is shaped through repetition. Every action you take is a vote for the person you believe you are. Every time you follow through, you cast a vote for a disciplined identity. Every time you avoid a task, you cast a vote for a distracted identity. Every time you take responsibility, you cast a vote for a powerful identity. Every time you procrastinate, you cast a vote for a powerless one. Most people build an identity of inconsistency because they choose short-term comfort repeatedly. And over time, their brain learns, this is who we are. They don't realize that small decisions compound not only externally but internally. Discipline isn't built in grand moments of motivation. It is built in small moments of self-trust. Tiny promises kept. Small victories earned. Minor discomfort endured. Quiet steps taken when nobody is watching. You don't suddenly become disciplined. You become disciplined one vote at a time. If you want discipline that lasts, you must rebuild your identity at the root. That starts with rejecting the old story you've been telling yourself. The story that says you're undisciplined. The story that says you're inconsistent. The story that says you fail every time you try. That story is not true. It is memory. And memory is not destiny. Your past behavior is not a life sentence. It is simply a record of who you were before you understood how your mind works. Before you realized the power of identity. Before you recognized your potential. You cannot create a new life with an old story. You must consciously rewrite it. You must decide who you are going to be and then prove it through action. Identity begins with language. The way you talk about yourself shapes the way you behave. When you say I'm lazy, you are reinforcing it. When you say I'm inconsistent, you strengthen it. When you say I just can't focus, you become the person who can't focus. Your words become self-fulfilling prophecies. This is why the world's most disciplined people protect their self-talk like a fortress. They speak in alignment with who they are becoming, not who they used to be. They say, I show up for myself. They say, I do what I need to do. They say, I'm consistent. Even before they fully believe it, because identity grows through repetition, not certainty. The next step is self-trust. Discipline is simply self-trust in motion. When you trust yourself, you follow through. When you don't trust yourself, you break your own promises without guilt. The reason inconsistency feels easy is because you have taught yourself that your word is flexible. You've taught yourself that your promises can be negotiated. You've taught yourself that the commitments you make to yourself are optional, and the brain follows what it has been taught. To build a disciplined identity, you must reverse this pattern. You must teach your brain that your promises matter. And the way to do that is simple. Start with promises so small you cannot break them. Not grand goals. Not extreme plans. Not unrealistic expectations. Small, tiny, undeniable promises. If you decide to read 2 pages, read 2 pages. If you decide to meditate for 1 minute, meditate for 1 minute. If you decide to do 5 push-ups, do 5 push-ups. These tiny actions seem insignificant, but they are psychologically profound. They rebuild trust. They signal to your brain, we do what we say we will do. Once that belief takes root, bigger actions become possible. Another essential part of identity is environment. You cannot become disciplined in an environment built for distraction. Your environment must match the person you are becoming, not the person you have been. If you want to be disciplined, your room must reflect discipline. Your workspace must reflect discipline. Your habits must reflect discipline. Discipline is not built in chaos. It is built in structure. It is built by removing temptation instead of relying on willpower. If you are surrounded by distraction, impulse will always win. A disciplined identity requires you to design your world to support your future, not your impulses. Another component of building a disciplined identity is learning to separate feelings from actions. Undisciplined people wait until they feel motivated. Disciplined people act regardless of how they feel. This is one of the greatest identity shifts you will ever make, the realization that feelings are suggestions, not commands. You do not need to feel like doing something in order to do it. You do not need emotional alignment before taking action. You do not need to enjoy the process to show up. When you stop expecting your emotions to cooperate, you begin mastering discipline. And that mastery becomes part of your identity, the identity of someone who can act. Independently of mood, identity also grows through ritual. Rituals anchor behavior. Rituals make discipline feel natural, predictable, effortless. Rituals shape your mornings, your evenings, your work patterns, your energy, your momentum. When your rituals reflect discipline, your identity automatically adjusts to match them. Discipline thrives in structured routines. You are not becoming robotic, you are becoming reliable. Identity also requires rewriting your internal narrative around effort. For most of your life, effort has been associated with discomfort, obligation, or punishment. But disciplined people attach positive meaning to effort. They see effort as transformation. They see effort as alignment. They see effort as self-respect. They see effort as the bridge to the life they want. When you begin to view effort as empowerment rather than suffering, discipline becomes easier. Another core part of identity is the ability to choose your future self over your present self. Every decision you make either honors the person you want to become or betrays them. A disciplined identity thinks beyond today. It asks, what will this choice create? It acts with the future in mind. It remembers what you're building. It remembers what you're protecting. It remembers why you started. Undisciplined people are loyal only to the present moment. Disciplined people are loyal to the future version of themselves. Identity also changes when you learn to validate yourself instead of needing external motivation. When discipline depends on inspiration, you remain fragile. Motivation is a spark, identity is the flame. You cannot rely on others to hype you, encourage you, push you, or remind you. You cannot wait for the perfect moment or emotional surge. You must learn to validate your own efforts, your own progress, your own transformation. This self-validation strengthens your identity and makes discipline sustainable. The final step in building a disciplined identity is repetition, not intensity. Repetition. You become what you repeatedly do. You do not become disciplined by doing hard things once. You become disciplined by showing up again and again, even in small ways, until discipline becomes part of your character. Identity grows quietly, gradually, incrementally. You won't notice the shift at first. You'll simply realize one day that you no longer negotiate with yourself. You no longer break your own promises. You no longer run from discomfort. You no longer rely on motivation. You have become the person you once struggled to be. Discipline is not the goal. It is the natural consequence of becoming someone who respects themselves deeply. When you change your identity, your behavior must follow. When you change your identity, your habits transform naturally. When you change your identity, discipline stops feeling like a battle and starts feeling like alignment. You are not trying to force discipline into your life. You are becoming the person who lives it effortlessly. You are not building habits. You are building someone new. Most people think discipline is a time management issue, or a motivation issue, or a willpower issue. But the truth is much deeper. Discipline is an emotional issue. You don't avoid tasks because they're difficult. You avoid them because of how they make you feel. You don't procrastinate because you're lazy. You procrastinate because a task triggers discomfort, insecurity, overwhelm, pressure, or fear. You don't break your commitments because you can't do the work. You break them because your emotions become too loud for your intentions to overcome. Discipline isn't failing because you lack strength. Discipline is failing because you lack emotional regulation. Until you learn to manage your emotions, you will never learn to control your mind. And until you learn to control your mind, you will never master discipline. Think about every moment you broke discipline. Every task you avoided. Every routine you abandoned. Every promise you postponed. Beneath each choice was an emotion you didn't want to face, a wave of discomfort you weren't prepared to sit with. Maybe it was the anxiety of starting something unfamiliar. Maybe it was the boredom of doing something repetitive. Maybe it was the fear of failure disguised as procrastination. Maybe it was the overwhelm of not knowing where to begin. Maybe it was the insecurity of feeling not good enough. Maybe it was the frustration of slow progress. People don't run from tasks, they run from emotions. This is why discipline collapses, not because the work is too hard, but because the emotions are too loud. Your brain is wired to avoid emotional discomfort. It interprets discomfort as danger. It tries to protect you from anything that feels unpleasant, uncertain, or difficult. But growth always feels unpleasant, uncertain, and difficult. The problem is not that you experience emotional discomfort. The problem is that you try to escape it instead of learning to handle it. When you avoid discomfort, you strengthen the part of your brain that resists discipline. When you face discomfort, you strengthen the part of your brain that controls it. Emotional avoidance kills discipline. Emotional regulation builds it. Emotional regulation is the ability to feel a difficult emotion without letting it dictate your behavior. It is the ability to experience discomfort without running. It is the ability to stay present with your frustration, fear, boredom, stress, or insecurity without allowing those feelings to take control. Emotional regulation means you can feel things deeply without reacting impulsively. And this skill is the foundation of discipline. Because discipline is simply doing what needs to be done, even when you don't feel like it. This is only possible when you can tolerate negative emotions without collapsing under their pressure. The truth is that emotions are temporary, even the intense ones. They rise, peak, and fall. They move through you like waves. But when you avoid an emotion, you teach your brain that the emotion is dangerous. You reinforce fear. You reinforce avoidance. You reinforce impulsiveness. And your mind becomes controlled by feelings you never learned to sit with. Every time you run from discomfort, you teach your brain that you cannot handle it. Every time you face discomfort, you teach your brain that you are stronger than it. Emotional regulation is the training that transforms fear into power, chaos into control, impulses into discipline. To build discipline, you must begin by understanding your emotional triggers. What part of the task scares you? What part overwhelms you? What part makes you feel insecure? What part reminds you of past failures? What part threatens your comfort? Every emotional trigger has a story behind it. And once you understand that story, the emotion loses some of its power. When you can name the emotion, you can navigate it. One of the most effective forms of emotional regulation begins with a simple acknowledgement. I feel anxious right now, or I feel overwhelmed, or I feel resistant. When you acknowledge emotion instead of fighting it, your nervous system calms. The fear becomes less sharp. The discomfort becomes less intimidating. The moment becomes more manageable. Another essential part of emotional regulation is the ability to pause. Emotion wants you to act instantly. Emotion wants you to react impulsively. Emotion wants you to escape discomfort as quickly as possible. But a regulated mind can pause, even for 5 seconds, even for one deep breath, even for a moment of awareness. That pause is where discipline is born. Because in that pause, you regain control. You shift from instinct to intention. You separate feeling from action, and that separation is where disciplined behavior becomes possible. Without the pause, emotion leads. With the pause, choice leads. Breathing is another powerful tool in emotional regulation. Not because it's spiritual or dramatic, but because it physiologically calms your brain. When you feel overwhelmed, your body thinks you're in danger. Your heart rate increases. Your breathing becomes shallow. Your thoughts race. Your body shifts into survival mode. A few deep, slow breaths signal safety to your nervous system. They bring your brain out of panic and back into logic. They give you the clarity to choose discipline over impulse. Something as simple as breathing can change the outcome of your entire day. Another crucial skill is emotional reframing. When you experience discomfort, your brain creates a narrative around it. Studying feels overwhelming because your brain says, you're going to fail. Exercising feels exhausting because your brain says, you're not strong enough. Starting a project feels scary because your brain says, you don't know what you're doing. These thoughts are not facts, they are interpretations. They are emotional reactions disguised as truth. Reframing means replacing the reaction with a conscious narrative, not a delusional one, a self-supporting one. This is difficult, but I can handle it. This is uncomfortable, but it won't kill me. This is unfamiliar, but I can learn. When you reframe, you weaken the emotional reaction. And with a weaker emotional reaction, discipline becomes easier. Another key to emotional regulation is accepting discomfort as normal. Most people fail at discipline because they assume discomfort means something is wrong. They think boredom means they're not motivated. They think stress means they're doing something incorrectly. They think fear means they should stop. But discomfort is not a sign of danger, it is a sign of growth. The moment you stop interpreting discomfort as something to escape, start interpreting it as something to embrace, discipline becomes natural. Your relationship with discomfort changes everything. It's also important to stop moralizing your emotions. Feeling resistance doesn't make you weak. Feeling fear doesn't make you undisciplined. Feeling overwhelmed doesn't make you incapable. Humans are emotional creatures. Emotions are not enemies. They are signals, but they are not commands. When you stop treating your emotions as flaws and start treating them as information, your relationship with discipline transforms. You stop fighting your emotions and start navigating them. And when emotions no longer feel like threats, discipline no longer feels like suffering. A disciplined mind is not a mind without emotion. It is a mind that can feel emotion without losing control. Emotional regulation means understanding that your emotions are loud, but they don't get to make decisions. It means recognizing that you can feel unmotivated and still act. You can feel insecure and still move forward. You can feel tired and still show up. You can feel resistant and still commit. This is the superpower of emotionally regulated people. They do not wait for their feelings to cooperate. they move anyway. Another crucial element is setting low-friction entry points. Your emotional resistance is highest at the beginning of a task. Once you start, the emotion loses 70% of its power. Emotional resistance thrives in anticipation, not action. That's why thinking about doing something feels heavier than doing it. To regulate emotion, you must lower the activation energy. Tell yourself you'll do just 2 minutes, just 1 paragraph, just 1 exercise, just 5 minutes of cleaning. This is not a trick, it is emotional chemistry. Once you begin, your brain shifts from avoidance to momentum. Your emotions settle. Your mind relaxes. You prove to yourself that starting isn't as hard as your emotions made it seem. Another part of emotional regulation is reducing emotional triggers in your environment. The more chaotic your surroundings, the louder your emotions become. Clutter heightens anxiety. Notifications spike stress. Noise increases overwhelm. Disorganization intensifies resistance. A disciplined identity grows best in a calm environment. You cannot regulate emotions in a space filled with psychological triggers. The quieter your environment, the quieter your emotional resistance becomes. The final part of emotional regulation is repetition. You cannot regulate emotion once and expect mastery. Regulation becomes easier the more you practice it. Every time you sit with discomfort instead of running, you strengthen discipline. Every time you hold space for frustration without quitting, you strengthen discipline. Every time you breathe through fear instead of avoiding it, you strengthen discipline. Every time you choose action despite emotion, you strengthen discipline. Discipline is not the absence of emotional, it is the ability to act while emotional. And that ability grows through repetition. Discipline becomes effortless. Once you stop fighting your emotions and start understanding them, you don't need to eliminate emotion. You need to master it. You need to lead it. You need to rise above it. The most powerful truth about discipline is this: your brain can be rewired. You are not trapped inside old habits. You are not confined to your past patterns. You are not doomed to be inconsistent. Your brain is not fixed. It is flexible, adaptable, shapeable. It learns whatever you repeat. It becomes whatever you practice. It reinforces whatever you do consistently. Your habits are not reflections of your character. They are reflections of your conditioning. And conditioning can be rewritten. Your mind is constantly forming neural pathways, strengthening certain behaviors and weakening others. Every time you choose discipline, you carve a new path. Every time you choose impulse, you carve another. Consistency is not built through force. It is built through repetition, through rewiring, through teaching the brain what to value, what to expect, what to prioritize. Most people fail at discipline because they try to fight their brain instead of train it. They try to use willpower instead of understanding. They force behaviors that their brain has never been prepared for. They blame themselves for inconsistency, not realizing that their mind is simply following its programming. If you want to master discipline, you must stop relying on short-term motivation and start creating long-term neural patterns. You must make discipline familiar to your brain, because the brain doesn't crave what is good for you, it craves what is familiar. Familiarity feels safe. Familiarity feels rewarding. Familiarity feels automatic. Discipline becomes effortless only when it becomes familiar. To rewire your brain for consistency, you must understand how habits are formed. Every habit, good or bad, follows the same formula: cue, behavior, reward. When your brain is triggered by a cue, it performs a behavior, then receives a reward. And over time, the brain links the cue with the behavior and begins craving the reward. This is why you keep repeating habits you know are bad. Your brain has learned the pattern. It has learned the emotional payoff. It has learned the dopamine hit attached to the behavior. The habit may be destructive, but the brain does not care. It cares only about repetition and reward. That means the most powerful way to create consistency is not discipline alone, but by manipulating your cues and your rewards. One of the simplest ways to rewire your brain is by creating clear, consistent cues for your new habits. If you want to work out every morning, your cue might be laying out your clothes the night before. If you want to read daily, your cue might be placing your book on your pillow. If you want to journal, your cue might be leaving your notebook next to your toothbrush. Your brain thrives on cues. They reduce mental effort. They make behavior automatic. Without cues, your brain has to consciously choose discipline, and conscious choice is exhausting. With cues, the behavior becomes expected, predictable, natural. Another key to rewiring your brain is minimizing friction. Your brain avoids anything that feels difficult to initiate. It wants the path of least resistance. So you must make the disciplined choice easy and the undisciplined choice difficult. If you want to stop eating junk food, remove it from your house. If you want to stop scrolling your phone, leave it in another room. If you want to stop procrastinating, break your tasks into small steps. The brain resists friction, not effort. When the first step becomes easy, the rest becomes easier. Consistency also requires creating small wins. The brain loves progress, even tiny progress. Every time you complete a task, even a small one, your brain releases dopamine. That dopamine reinforces the behavior. It tells your brain, this felt good. Do it again. Most people fail because they aim too high too fast. They set extreme goals they cannot maintain. They overwhelm their brain with pressure, and the brain shuts down under pressure. It avoids what feels too heavy. But when the goal is small, achievable, and consistent, the brain feels rewarded, not intimidated. This is how small wins rewire the mind. They transform discipline from something painful into something pleasurable. They create a cycle of positive reinforcement that builds momentum. Another powerful tool for rewiring the brain is repetition. The more you repeat a behavior, the stronger the neural pathway becomes. At first, discipline feels unnatural because the pathway is weak. You have to consciously choose it. It requires effort. But after enough repetition, the pathway becomes stronger than the old one. The behavior becomes automatic. You no longer have to force yourself, you'll simply do it. This is how brushing your teeth became automatic. This is how driving became automatic. This is how speaking became automatic. Every skill in your life once felt difficult until repetition made it effortless. Discipline becomes effortless in the exact same way. But repetition requires consistency, not perfection. The secret to rewiring your brain is not doing something flawlessly, is doing it frequently. Missing one day does not matter. Missing 2 days rarely matters. What matters is preventing the mind from slipping back into old patterns. The brain learns through patterns. If you repeat a behavior most days, the brain learns it. If you repeat inconsistency most days, the brain learns that instead, consistency is not about streaks. It is about identity. What you repeatedly do defines who you become. Another key to rewiring your brain is understanding cravings. The brain craves dopamine. That is why impulsive habits feel addictive. They offer instant dopamine. Discipline often feels hard because the reward is delayed. The key to long-term consistency is learning to attach dopamine to disciplined behavior. You must reward progress. Not with unhealthy indulgence, but with acknowledgement. With pride, with satisfaction, with celebration, with internal reinforcement. The brain does not need external rewards, it needs emotional rewards. When discipline begins to feel good, the brain will crave it. The next step in rewiring your brain is removing the all-or-nothing mentality. All-or-nothing thinking is the enemy of consistency. When you believe you must be perfect, you become more fragile. One mistake leads to guilt. Guilt leads to avoidance. Avoidance leads to regression. And the brain learns quickly. When we fail, we stop. But disciplined people do not operate like that. They understand failure is part of the process. They understand that missing a day is not the same as losing momentum. They understand that consistency is built through returning, not perfection. When you remove the pressure of perfection, consistency becomes far easier. To rewire your brain for consistency, you must also practice self-interruption. Self-interruption means catching yourself mid-distraction, mid-impulse, or mid-procrastination, and redirecting your behavior. Most people think they must completely eliminate distraction, but that is impossible. The real skill is noticing the moment you drift and gently pulling yourself back. Every time you interrupt an impulse, you weaken the old neural pathway. Every time you redirect, you strengthen the new one. Self-interruption is the neural equivalent of breaking a bad habit in real time. Another essential part of mental rewiring is using activation phrases. These are simple sentences that shift your brain from passive to active mode. Phrases like, just start, 5 minutes, 1 step, show up. These cues activate the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for conscious decision-making. They disrupt emotional resistance and bring logic back online. Activation phrases are not magic. They are neurological triggers. They signal your mind that it's time to move. Your environment also plays a powerful role in rewiring your brain. The brain does not function in isolation. It adapts to surroundings. If you want consistency, your environment must reflect it. A clean space reduces emotional noise. A designated work area enhances focus. A structured routine decreases decision fatigue. A calm environment softens anxiety. A disciplined environment creates a disciplined mind. Because your environment cues your brain hundreds of times a day, often without you realizing it. Another key to rewiring your brain is creating a rhythm. Humans thrive on rhythm. When your life has rhythm, consistency becomes second nature. Think about how natural it feels to sleep and wake at the same times each day. How natural it feels to follow familiar routes. How natural it feels to repeat familiar routines. Rhythm reduces uncertainty. Uncertainty increases resistance. When your days follow a rhythm, your brain relaxes. It knows what to expect. It knows what to do. It stops negotiating with you. Rhythm makes discipline predictable instead of painful. To fully rewire your brain, you must eliminate identity conflict. Identity conflict is when your goals do not match your self-perception. If you say, I want to be disciplined, but you believe you're inconsistent, your brain will always sabotage your efforts. The subconscious mind rejects any action that contradicts identity. That is why the internal work of identity, which you learned earlier, is essential for rewiring. Without identity alignment, consistency becomes a battle. With identity alignment, consistency becomes a habit. Another part of rewiring the brain is reframing resistance. Resistance is not a sign that something is wrong. It is a sign that your brain is adjusting. When you feel resistance, your brain is simply doing what it always does, protecting its old pathways. You must learn to interpret resistance as progress, not failure. Resistance means your brain is changing. Resistance means the old pattern is losing power. Resistance means the new pattern is being built. When you stop fearing resistance, it loses control over you. Weakness does not show up in your life as something dramatic or obvious. It shows up quietly, disguised as harmless habits. It shows up as procrastination so small, you barely notice it. It shows up as 5 more minutes that turn into wasted hours. It shows up as the urge to check your phone again, even though nothing new is there. It shows up as comfort-seeking, impulse-driven behavior that feels innocent but slowly destroys your momentum. Weakness isn't loud. Weakness is subtle. The voice inside your head that convinces you to choose what feels good instead of what makes you grow. And if you don't confront that voice, it will run your life. It will steal your time. It will soften your mind. It will drain your focus. It will sabotage your discipline. Weakness is the silent killer of potential. And distractions are the tools it uses to keep you small. We live in a world engineered for distraction. Not by accident, but by design. Every app, every platform, every notification is built to hijack your attention and steal your discipline. Companies spend billions studying the human brain to exploit your impulses. They want you addicted. They want you scrolling, want you overstimulated, want you impulsive, reactive, and mentally fragmented. Because distraction is profitable. And the more distracted you become, the weaker you become. Weakness thrives in overstimulation. When your mind is scattered, your discipline collapses. When your attention is fragmented, your willpower decays. when your brain is addicted to dopamine hits. Long-term goals feel impossible. Most people never realize how much of their weakness is manufactured, how much of their laziness is conditioned, how much of their inconsistency is engineered. You didn't fail discipline because you were incapable. You failed because you were surrounded by systems designed to break your focus. The world wants you weak because weak people are easier to control, easier to distract, and easier to manipulate. But the moment you understand this, everything changes. Weakness is not something you accept, it's something you eliminate. And distractions are not something you tolerate. They're something you defeat. The first step to eliminating distractions is acknowledging that you are addicted to them. Not metaphorically, neurologically. Every time you check your phone without thinking, your brain gets a microdose of dopamine. Every time you scroll through endless content, you flood your brain with stimulation. Every time you chase novelty, you weaken your ability to stay focused. You are conditioning your mind to expect constant entertainment, heavy stimulation, instant results, and zero friction. And when the brain becomes dependent on stimulation, real work, the kind that requires effort, patience, and delayed reward, feels suffocating. It feels boring. It feels impossible. You're not unmotivated. Your dopamine system is overloaded. Your attention span is damaged. Your brain is overstimulated. No amount of motivation can overpower a physiology that has been conditioned for distraction. To break weakness, you must detox your mind. Not by running away from technology, but by taking control of it. You must rebuild your brain's tolerance for boredom. You must rebuild your attention span. You must rebuild your ability to focus without needing constant stimulation. The mind becomes strong when it learns to sit with monotony, when it learns to endure stillness, when it learns to engage deeply with a single task without searching for escape. Weakness grows in overstimulation. Distractions also weaken you psychologically. Every time you allow yourself to be distracted, you reinforce the belief that your impulses are stronger than your intentions. You prove to your brain that you cannot control yourself. You teach your mind that instant gratification wins. And the more you lose these micro battles, the harder discipline becomes. Eliminating distractions is not just about protecting your focus. It's about reclaiming your authority over your own mind. It is about proving to yourself that you are stronger than your urges. But distractions aren't always external. Many of them come from within. Internal distractions are emotional escape routes. Doubt, insecurity, stress, boredom, fear. These emotions trigger avoidance. When a task threatens your ego, you distract yourself. When a task feels overwhelming, you distract yourself. When a task makes you question your ability, you distract yourself. Distraction is emotional avoidance disguised as entertainment. Till you confront the emotion behind the distraction, you will always find new ways to escape yourself. Eliminating distractions requires emotional honesty. You must ask yourself, what am I avoiding? The answer is almost always discomfort. And eliminating distractions begins with the courage to feel that discomfort without running from it. Another part of breaking weakness is building friction around your impulses. Weakness thrives when temptations are easy to access, when your phone is within reach, when your environment is cluttered, when your workflow requires too many choices, when pleasure is one click away. Discipline collapses when convenience becomes your default. To eliminate distractions, you must make impulsive behavior difficult. Remove apps. Turn off notifications. Put your phone in another room. Set time limits. Rearrange your environment. Place the easy path with the intentional one. You cannot rely on willpower alone. You must engineer your environment for success. A disciplined environment creates a disciplined mind. Weakness also grows when your mind is overstressed. Stress shrinks your attention span. Stress fuels impulsiveness. Stress makes you seek escape instead of action. Stress triggers the survival brain, which cares only about immediate relief, not long-term goals. To break weakness, you must learn to regulate stress. Not by avoiding difficulty, but by cultivating internal calm. Calmness is strength. Calmness allows you to see clearly instead of reacting impulsively. Calmness gives you space to choose the disciplined path. Calmness weakens distraction by weakening emotional volatility. The more control you have over your internal state, the less control distractions have over you. Another powerful part of eliminating weakness is embracing discomfort. Weakness grows in comfort. When your life becomes too easy, your mind becomes too soft. When you avoid difficulty, you weaken your resilience. When you avoid challenge, your tolerance for discomfort shrinks. And the smaller your tolerance for discomfort, the harder discipline becomes. You must intentionally step into discomfort. Small doses, controlled doses, regular doses, cold showers, early mornings, hard workouts, silent study sessions, focused work without stimulation. These are not punishments, they are training. You are training your nervous system to endure discomfort without escaping into distraction. A strong mind is built through voluntary discomfort. A weak mind is built through constant comfort. Another element of eliminating distractions is learning how to direct your attention like a weapon. Attention is the most valuable resource you have. Whatever you give your attention to grows. Whatever you starve attention from dies. Weakness grows when your attention is scattered. Strength grows when your attention is intentional. You must learn to focus deeply, undivided, uninterrupted. Not for hours at a time, but for deliberate blocks. 20 minutes, 30 minutes, slowly increasing. Deep focus triggers a psychological state called flow, where distractions lose their power and your performance skyrockets. Flow is not a magical feeling. It is a trained state. And the more you train it, the more natural it becomes. Another essential part of eliminating weakness is building internal discipline rituals. Rituals create predictability. Predictability reduces chaos. Chaos invites distraction. The moment. Your day becomes unstructured. Your mind becomes vulnerable. Rituals anchor your discipline. Morning rituals, work rituals, night rituals. Rituals where your brain knows exactly what to expect. Rituals where distraction becomes unnatural. Your day should be structured enough that your mind doesn't have to constantly choose. Choice is exhausting. Structure is discipline. Weakness also grows in self-deception. You cannot eliminate distractions if you lie to yourself about your patterns. If you pretend you can handle stimulation when you cannot. If you pretend you can multitask when you can't. If you pretend you have control while escaping into the same habits every day, self-honesty is the foundation of strength. You must observe yourself without judgment. Understand your triggers. Understand your impulses. Understand the moments weakness takes control. You cannot defeat a pattern you deny. You cannot eliminate a distraction you refuse to acknowledge. The moment you become honest with yourself is the moment you become powerful. In the end, eliminating distractions is not about removing everything tempting from your life. It is about strengthening the part of you that no longer needs the temptation. It is about becoming someone who no longer seeks escape because you are committed to building something meaningful. Weakness fades when you stop feeding it. Strength grows when you nurture it. Distraction loses its control when you reclaim your focus. Discipline rises when you choose intention over impulse. Your weakness is not permanent. Your distractions are not unbeatable. Your focus is not broken. Your mind is not lost. You are simply one decision away from reclaiming your strength. One moment away from breaking your old patterns. One choice away from building a mind that cannot be shaken. This is where your discipline becomes unbreakable. This is where your power returns. This is where weakness dies and your true strength begins. Your entire life is shaped by one question. Do you choose what feels good now or what feels good later? That question, more than talent, more than intelligence, more than luck, is what separates the disciplined from the distracted, the successful from the stuck, the powerful from the ordinary. The ability to delay gratification is the core of self-control, the foundation of discipline, and the single greatest predictor of long-term success. Yet most people never master it not because they don't want to, but because they don't understand the psychology behind it. They believe discipline is about willpower, when in truth, discipline is about managing reward. And the ability to delay gratification is about understanding how your brain interprets reward, pleasure, desire, and satisfaction. Your brain is wired to seek pleasure and avoid pain. That wiring kept your ancestors alive. It pushed them toward food, warmth, shelter, safety, reproduction, and community. It pushed them away from danger, risk, and uncertainty. But in the modern world, this wiring becomes a trap. Pleasure is now available instantly. Food, entertainment, stimulation, validation, dopamine, all of it is one tap away. The world around you is structured to make immediate pleasure easier than ever. And the easier pleasure becomes, the harder discipline becomes. Because discipline requires you to override your ancient reward system to choose long-term benefit over short-term comfort, to deny the immediate craving for the sake of your future self. That is not natural. It requires conscious control. It requires emotional regulation. It requires a brain trained to value future reward more than immediate relief. The science is clear. The brain loves immediate reward because it delivers dopamine quickly and predictably. Delayed reward delivers dopamine slowly and uncertainly. Your mind must believe the future reward is worth the wait. But if your brain has been conditioned by years of instant pleasure, constant scrolling, sugary foods, binge watching, immediate entertainment, it forms a neurological bias toward instant gratification. This bias does not mean you are weak. It means your dopamine system has been overstimulated. And when the dopamine system is overstimulated, the brain becomes less responsive to long-term rewards. Work feels harder. Patience feels painful. Effort feels unbearable. The present feels more important than the future. This is the psychological trap that destroys discipline and ruins potential. To build discipline, you must reverse this bias. You must retrain your brain to find satisfaction in delayed gratification. You must teach your mind that waiting is rewarding, that effort is rewarding, that progress is rewarding, that long-term success generates more fulfillment than short-term pleasure ever could. The human brain can learn this, but only through consistent training. Delayed gratification is a skill. It is not talent. It is not personality. It is not genetic destiny. It is learned. And it begins with understanding your relationship with desire. Desire is not the problem. Desire is natural. Desire is human. Desire is life-giving. The problem is when desire becomes impulsive, when desire becomes compulsive, when desire becomes a reflex instead of a conscious choice. Impulsive desire is the enemy of discipline because it demands immediate action. It convinces you that your craving is urgent, that your emotion is truth, that your impulse is irresistible. But the science shows something powerful. Most cravings only last 10 minutes. The urge rises, peaks, and falls. The problem is that most people act during the peak and never learn to let the urge pass. When you understand that cravings are temporary, you gain control. You learn to sit with desire instead of obeying it. You learn to watch the craving rise and fall like a wave. You learn that not every desire deserves your action. The second key to mastering delayed gratification is shifting your reward system. You must learn to find pleasure in the process, not just the outcome. People who succeed long-term do not rely on the distant reward alone. They enjoy the act of working toward it. They find satisfaction in showing up. They find fulfillment in progress. They feel pride in consistency. They experience internal reward from external effort. This is not because they were born different. It is because they train their minds to associate discipline with pleasure. You must train yourself to do the same. One way to do this is by rewarding yourself for disciplined behavior, not with unhealthy indulgence, but with emotional recognition. When you complete a task, take a moment to feel good about it. Not in a dramatic way, but in a deliberate way. Tell yourself, this matters. Let your brain register the achievement. Let yourself feel proud. When you emotionally reward discipline, you reinforce the neural pathways that make discipline easier next time. The more you reward long-term behavior, the more your brain learns to value delayed gratification over instant pleasure. Another key to mastering delayed gratification is understanding how the brain perceives time. The brain struggles with long-term thinking because the future feels abstract. The further away the reward, the weaker its psychological impact. This is why people sabotage long-term goals. They cannot feel the reward strongly enough. To counter this, you must make your future self feel real. You must connect emotionally with the version of you who benefits from your discipline. Visualize their life. Imagine their confidence. Feel their peace. Understand how they live, think, and carry themselves. When your future self becomes emotionally real, your brain begins valuing long-term rewards more strongly. The mind must care about the future before it will fight for it. Another essential principle is building tolerance for boredom. Boredom is the enemy of delayed gratification. When something feels slow, your brain demands stimulation. And stimulation is always easier than patience. If you cannot tolerate boredom, you cannot delay gratification. If you cannot delay gratification, you cannot build real discipline. Modern life has made boredom rare because everything is engineered for constant engagement. But without boredom, the mind becomes fragile. It becomes uncomfortable with stillness. It becomes intolerant of monotony. And progress lives inside monotony. Repetition, mundanity, doing the same thing over and over. Long after the excitement fades, this is where champions are built. To master delayed gratification, you must practice being bored without running to distraction. You must sit in the quiet. You must train your mind to find calm in monotony. You must strengthen your ability to stay with the task, even when your brain wants escape. Another powerful habit is lowering the activation energy required to begin a task. Delayed gratification collapses when starting feels overwhelming. The harder something is to begin, the more likely you are to chase instant pleasure instead. To counter this, reduce the size of your starting point. Start with 2 minutes. Start with 1 sentence. Start with the simplest possible action. Your brain resists big tasks, but accepts small ones. Once you begin, the brain switches states from resistance to momentum. Momentum is the antidote to impulsiveness. When you start small, you make delayed gratification easier. Another part of mastering delayed gratification is managing your emotional triggers. Cravings for instant gratification often arise from emotional discomfort. Fear, loneliness, anxiety, insecurity, frustration. Instant pleasure numbs discomfort temporarily, but the discomfort returns stronger. This is why emotional regulation is essential. When you can regulate your emotions, you no longer need instant gratification to soothe them. You can sit with them. You can process them. You can move through them without seeking escape. Emotional control makes delayed gratification. It's possible because you are no longer running from your own feelings. Another key principle is using future pacing. Before acting on impulse, pause and ask, how will I feel in 1 hour? How will I feel tomorrow? How will this choice serve my future? This shifts your brain from impulsive thinking to reflective thinking. It activates the prefrontal cortex, the logical, disciplined part of your mind. Future pacing reconnects you with your long-term goals and weakens the immediate craving. When you see the future clearly, the present craving loses power. Another essential part of mastering delayed gratification is rewiring your environment. If temptations surround you, your impulses will overpower your intentions. You must design your environment to support long-term thinking instead of short-term pleasure. Remove the junk food. Hide the apps. Turn off the notifications. Clear the clutter. Put reminders of your future in places you see daily. Your environment shapes your behavior more than willpower ever will. If you want delayed gratification to be your default, your environment must reflect that future. Finally, the ultimate key to mastering delayed gratification is identity. You cannot consistently delay pleasure if you still see yourself as someone who chooses the easy path. You must become the kind of person who values long-term reward, the kind of person who honors their future self, the kind of person who resists impulse, the kind of person who is not controlled by cravings. Your actions follow your identity. When you believe you are someone who chooses growth over comfort, your behavior aligns automatically. Delayed gratification is not suffering, it is maturity. It is emotional mastery. It is mental strength. Everyone wants self-control. Everyone wants to be the kind of person who can wake up early, stay focused, resist temptation, follow through on commitments, and stay consistent no matter how they feel. But very few people ever achieve real self-control. And it's not because they are weak, it's because the truth about self-control is far more uncomfortable than most people want to admit. Self-control is not the glamorous, clean, motivational idea people imagine. It is messy. It is gritty. It is uncomfortable. It often feels unfair. It demands sacrifice, emotional maturity, and psychological strength. It requires you to confront parts of yourself you would rather avoid, and it forces you to do what you must instead of what you want. Most people don't lack self-control because they are incapable. They lack it because they are unwilling to embrace the truth. Self-control requires suffering. The uncomfortable truth is that self-control starts with telling yourself no, not once, not occasionally, but repeatedly. Even when you're tired, even when you're stressed, even when you feel emotional, even when the world around you encourages you to give in. Self-control is not built when life is is built in the moments when you least want to practice it. It is built in temptation. It is built in discomfort. It is built in resistance. You become disciplined in the moment when your impulses scream for release, but you still choose restraint. That is the real training. That is the real battlefield. Not the good days. The hard ones. Self-control requires embracing the truth that feelings are unreliable. Your feelings will betray you. They will convince you to quit. They will tempt you toward comfort. They will tell you that you deserve a break even when you haven't earned one. They will exaggerate the difficulty of your tasks. They will inflate your fears. They will lie to you in the name of emotional relief. Your feelings care only about comfort. They do not care about your goals. They do not care about your future. They do not care about your potential. Until you learn to separate your actions from your feelings, self-control will always slip through your fingers. You must reach a point where you can say, I don't feel like it, but I will do it anyway. Another uncomfortable truth is that self-control requires structure. A disciplined life cannot exist inside chaos. If your environment is cluttered, your mind will be cluttered. If your schedule is unstructured, your discipline will be unstructured. If your routines are unstable, your self-control will be unstable. People who lack self-control often blame themselves, but the true issue is their lack of systems. Willpower cannot outperform an environment built for distraction. A strong environment makes self-control easier. A weak environment makes self-control impossible. If you want to control your mind, you must control your surroundings. Self-control also requires sacrifice. You cannot have everything you want and still be disciplined. You cannot feed your impulses and expect your self-control to grow. You cannot pursue comfort and mastery at the same time. You cannot indulge every craving and still expect to build mental strength. The truth is simple. Self-control requires giving something up. It requires choosing what is necessary over what is easy. It requires letting go of the behaviors, beliefs, and pleasures that keep you weak. And most people never reach their potential because they fear the sacrifice more than they desire the transformation. Self-control requires boundaries, not just with the world, but with yourself. You must set rules for your own behavior. You must decide what you will not tolerate from yourself. You must be able to say no internally with the same firmness you use externally. Without boundaries, self-control collapses. The mind becomes reactive, impulsive, and undisciplined. Boundaries create structure. Boundaries create consistency. Boundaries create identity. When you set boundaries for yourself, you are telling your mind, this is who I am. This is how I live. This is what I expect from myself. The mind listens. Another uncomfortable truth is that self-control feels lonely at first. Not emotionally, but behaviorally. When you choose discipline, you separate yourself from the habits of the masses. You become the person who doesn't scroll mindlessly. The person who doesn't binge it when stressed. The person who doesn't collapse when emotional. The person who chooses growth instead of comfort. This creates distance. You quickly realize how normalized impulsiveness has become. You realize how rare discipline truly is. But loneliness is temporary. What comes next is belonging, a sense of belonging to a stronger, higher, more powerful version of yourself. Self-control also requires honesty, and honesty is painful. You must acknowledge your patterns. You must admit your excuses. You must confront your self-sabotage. You must see your flaws clearly. You cannot correct what you refuse to acknowledge. And many people avoid this honesty because it threatens their ego. They prefer to blame circumstances, emotions, timing instead of recognizing the truth. The lack of self-control is often the result of avoiding responsibility. But the moment you become brutally honest with yourself is the moment you gain power. Because you cannot grow from lies, you can only grow from truth. Another uncomfortable truth is that self-control is physically tiring. It drains energy. Your brain uses glucose every time you resist temptation. This is why you feel mentally exhausted after long days filled with decisions. This exhaustion is not weakness. It is biology. If you understand this, you will realize self-control is not about forcing yourself endlessly. It is about managing your energy wisely. This is why disciplined people create routines that automate their decisions. They do not rely on willpower. They rely on structure. They safeguard their mental energy for the tasks that matter most. Self-control also requires time. It does not transform overnight. You do not become disciplined in a week. You do not erase years of impulsive behavior with a single decision. You must repeatedly choose restraint. Repeatedly choose the harder option. Repeatedly practice consistency. Self-control strengthens like a muscle slowly, through repetition. Most people fail because they expect fast results. But the truth is that the first month of building self-control feels like pushing through mental concrete. Progress is quiet, invisible, uncomfortable. But if you persist long enough, something extraordinary happens. The struggle becomes easier. The impulses become weaker. The distractions lose their grip. The cravings fade. And self-control becomes automatic. Another uncomfortable truth: self-control requires replacing emotional comfort with internal respect. Most people chase comfort because they want to feel good right now. But disciplined people chase respect. They want to feel proud of themselves. There is a difference. Comfort soothes you temporarily. Respect strengthens you permanently. When you start valuing self-respect more than instant gratification, everything changes. You stop choosing what feels good and start choosing what feels right. You stop chasing relief and start chasing resilience. You stop needing external validation and start building internal power. Self-control is not about suppressing desire. It is about elevating your standards. Self-control also requires emotional resilience. You will feel cravings. You will feel urges. You will feel resistance. You will feel frustration. You will feel boredom. You will feel fear. You will feel doubt. Self-control does not remove these feelings. It teaches you how to live above them. It teaches you how to observe emotions without obeying them. It teaches you how to endure discomfort without surrendering to it. It teaches you that feelings are not commands. They are temporary sensations. When you learn emotional resilience, you gain the power to act independently of your emotions. And that is the essence of self-control. Another uncomfortable truth is that self-control demands self-respect. You must believe your future is worth protecting. You must believe your goals are worth fighting for. You must believe your identity is worth strengthening. Without self-respect, discipline dies. You cannot consistently choose your future if you don't value yourself enough to invest in it. You cannot delay gratification if you don't believe you deserve the long-term reward. Self-control is not just behavioral, it is deeply emotional. It is rooted in self-worth. The final and perhaps most uncomfortable truth is this: self-control is built alone. No one can build it for you. No one can keep you consistent. No one can force you to choose discipline. No one can give you the mental strength you refuse to develop. Self-control is a private battle. It is fought internally, silently, moment by moment. You win it through repetition, through honesty, through discomfort, through sacrifice, through boundaries, through structure. Through choosing your future every single day, even when nobody is watching. Self-control is the result of choosing. who you want to become over who you are right now. It is choosing strength over weakness, identity over impulse, purpose over pleasure, future over present. It is uncomfortable. It is challenging. It is demanding. But it is also transformative. Because once you master self-control, you master your life. And nothing, not fear, not temptation, not emotion, not distraction can stop a person who has learned how to control themselves. There is a version of you that is unstoppable. A version of you who follows through on everything they start. A version of you who does not break promises to themselves. A version of you who wakes up with purpose instead of hesitation. A version of you who pushes through discomfort instead of running from it. A version of you who does not collapse under stress, who does not drown in emotion, who does not let impulse dictate their choices. A version of you who is disciplined, powerful, consistent, and mentally unshakable. That version is not a fantasy. It is not a dream. It is not someone else. It is who you become when your mind stops being your enemy and starts becoming your greatest weapon. Becoming unstoppable is not about being fearless. It is about acting despite fear. Fear does not disappear with discipline. Doubt does not disappear. Insecurity does not disappear. Difficulty does not disappear. What disappears is the power these emotions once had over you. Unstoppable people feel fear, but move anyway. They feel doubt, but continue anyway. They feel discomfort, but persist anyway. The difference is not what they feel, is what they do with what they feel. The disciplined mind does not need perfect conditions to take action. It takes action because action is part of its identity. Becoming unstoppable also requires the understanding that quitting is a habit. Most people think quitting is a singular decision, but it is not. It is a pattern, a behavior your brain learns through repetition. Every time you quit something, no matter how small, you train your mind to expect escape. You train your identity to believe you cannot handle difficulty. You reinforce the idea that discomfort is a valid reason to stop. Over time, quitting becomes easier than continuing. It becomes automatic. It becomes your default. You don't quit because things are too hard. You quit because your brain has been conditioned to run. Becoming unstoppable means reversing this conditioning. It means showing your brain that you finish what you start. It means proving to yourself again and again that you can handle discomfort without escaping it. Finishing becomes your habit. Persistence becomes your default. Continuity becomes part of who you are. Another truth about becoming unstoppable is that you must become emotionally independent. Most people rely on motivation, external validation, encouragement, praise, or accountability to stay consistent. This is why they collapse when life gets quiet. But unstoppable people derive strength from within. They do not need someone to hype them. They do not need applause. They do not need permission. They move because their standards demand it. They move because their identity requires it. They move because their future depends on it. Becoming unstoppable means breaking the dependence on external validation. It means becoming your own source of energy, direction, and momentum. Becoming unstoppable also requires brutal honesty. You cannot hide from your weaknesses. You cannot hide from your excuses. You cannot hide from your patterns. You cannot grow from what you refuse to confront. Unstoppable people look directly at their flaws, not to shame themselves, but to understand them. They analyze their patterns. They identify their triggers. They observe their impulses. They recognize the behaviors that sabotage them. And then they attack those weaknesses with strategy, not emotion. Honesty is not comfortable, but it is transformative. It is the doorway to mastery. Another essential part of becoming unstoppable is maintaining standards, not motivation. Standards are permanent. Motivation is temporary. Standards remain the same whether you are tired or energized, whether you are excited or bored, whether you are inspired or discouraged. Unstoppable people hold themselves to a higher standard even when nobody is watching. Their identity demands consistency. They don't lower their standards to match their mood. They raise their actions to match their standards. That shift choosing standards. Overfeelings is what separates the unstoppable from everyone else. Becoming unstoppable also means mastering consistency at the level of identity. You don't become unstoppable by having good days. You become unstoppable by showing up on the days you don't want to. It is easy to act when you feel good. It is easy to push forward when you are motivated. The real transformation happens on the days when everything inside you wants to stop. You move anyway. Every time you choose action in the presence of resistance, you strengthen your identity. Every time you push when your mind wants comfort, you build mental toughness. Every time you persist when quitting feels easier, you create a stronger version of yourself. This is how the unstoppable mind is built, not in comfort, but in resistance. Another truth is that unstoppable people do not negotiate with themselves. They don't waste time debating whether they should do something. They don't bargain with their commitments. They don't delay with internal arguments. They don't allow the emotional brain to negotiate with the logical brain. They simply act. They understand that negotiation leads to hesitation, hesitation leads to doubt, doubt leads to avoidance, and avoidance leads to failure. The moment you stop negotiating with yourself is the moment you take full control of your life. Another powerful characteristic of the U.S. unstoppable mind is resilience. Resilience is not the ability to avoid difficulty, it is the ability to recover from it. It is the ability to adapt, to refocus, to keep going even after mistakes, failures, or setbacks. Most people collapse after failure because they interpret failure as proof that they are incapable. But unstoppable people interpret failure differently. They see failure as data, information, feedback, a lesson, something to learn from, not something to run from. Failure does not break, that strengthens them. Every setback becomes a stepping stone. Every obstacle becomes an opportunity to grow. This mindset prevents them from quitting because they don't see difficulty as defeat, they see it. It's part of the process to become unstoppable. You must also develop what is known as future vision. This means keeping your long-term purpose in clear view, even when your emotions try to blind you. When you are tired, your future vision must guide you. When you feel doubt, your future vision must anchor you. When you face obstacles, your future vision must remind you why you started. A clear vision is a psychological shield. It protects you from impulsive decisions. It gives you strength when motivation fades. It keeps your mind aligned with your purpose. Without vision, discipline becomes difficult. With vision, discipline becomes a natural extension of who you are. Another uncomfortable truth about becoming unstoppable is that you must be willing to outgrow people. Not everyone will understand your discipline. Not everyone will admire your consistency. Not everyone will support your transformation. Some will criticize you. Some will doubt you. Some will feel threatened by your growth. Some will try to pull you back into the habits they share with you. Becoming unstoppable means letting go of people who encourage your weakness, reward your impulsiveness, or reinforce your sabotage. It does not mean being cruel. It means choosing your future over familiarity. To become unstoppable, you must also master your inner dialogue. The mind speaks to you all day, and most of its messages are negative by default. This is too hard, you're too tired, you can't do this. You should quit. These thoughts are not truth, they are patterns. And patterns can be rewritten. The unstoppable mind rewrites them through conscious, repetitive, assertive self-talk. Not delusional affirmation, but disciplined instruction. One step at a time. Keep going. You're built for this. Focus, show up. Inner dialogue shapes identity. Identity shapes behavior. Behavior shapes destiny. Another core element of becoming unstoppable is mastering momentum. Momentum is the most powerful force in discipline. Once you begin, everything becomes easier. Once you build streaks, you protect them. Once you get into flow, you fight to stay in it. Unstoppable people understand the power of momentum and protect it fiercely. They minimize breaks. They maintain rhythm. They avoid long periods of inactivity. They don't wait for motivation to return. They continue until momentum returns. Momentum creates consistency. Consistency creates identity. Identity creates an unstoppable mind. You become unstoppable when you realize that quitting is not an option. You become unstoppable when you decide that weakness is no longer acceptable. You become unstoppable when you understand that your future is worth fighting for. You become unstoppable when you commit to becoming someone your old self could never imagine being. This is the final evolution of discipline. The moment when you no longer force yourself to act because action has become who you are. You are not just building discipline. You are becoming the kind of person who never stops, never breaks, never quits. This is the unstoppable mind. This is the psychology of complete control. This is the version of you the world will never be able to contain.